Norio Hayakawa, and I'm a member of Meadowlark Senior Center right here in the city of Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Today, I would like to talk about New Mexico's favorite topic. That is to say, UFOs and Roswell. I really do believe that the UFO phenomenon itself seems to be real. But I also believe in the reality that so far there has never been any tangible, credible, documentary evidence whatsoever that an alien spaceship had crashed in Roswell in 1947, and I would like to explain my views on this amazing topic. The story of Roswell and the creation of a modern myth and how it all started. Nothing extraterrestrial crashed in New Mexico in July of 1947. But something did crash around June 14th of 1947, about 35 miles northwest of Roswell, and it wasn't a flying saucer. Now here's the timeline of the events that took place. On June 14, 1947, 10 days before the world had ever heard of flying saucers or flying discs, a rancher by the name of W. Mac Brazel and his 8-year-old son Vernon were about 7 or 8 miles from the ranch house of the J.B. Foster Ranch, which he operated, when they came upon a large area of bright wreckage made up of rubber strips, tinfoil, a rather tough paper, and sticks. There was no sign of any metal in the area which might have been used for an engine, and no sign of any propellers of any kind, although at least one paper fin had been glued onto some of the tinfoil. There were no words to be found anywhere on the instrument, although there were letters on some of the parts. Considerable Scotch tape and some tape with flowers printed upon it had been used in the construction. J.B. Foster Ranch was located about 30 miles southeast of Corona, New Mexico. The ranch was located about 35 miles northwest of Roswell. At that time, Brazel was in a hurry to get his round made, and he did not pay much attention to it. And then on June 24, 1947, the famous Kenneth Arnold incident in Washington State took place. This was the beginning of the modern era of worldwide sighting reports of flying saucers, later called UFOs. On July 4th, Brazel, his wife, Vernon, and a daughter, Betty, age 14, went back to the spot and gathered up quite a bit of the debris. July 5th, Saturday. It was on July 5th that Brazel first heard about the flying discs, and he wondered if what he had found 3 weeks before might be the remnants of one of these. On July 7th, Monday, Brazel came to Roswell to sell some wool, and while here, he went to see George Wilcox, who was the sheriff at that time, and whispered, kind of confidential-like, that he might have found a flying disc. Wilcox got in touch with the Roswell Army Airfield and Major Jesse A. Marcel. Marcel's commander, Colonel William Blanchard, ordered Marcel and counterintelligence officer Sheridan Cabot out to Brazel's ranch. Marcel and counterintelligence officer accompanied him home, where they picked up the rest of the pieces of the disc and went to his home to try to reconstruct it. By the way, it wasn't a disc, but they were pieces of whatever crashed there earlier. On viewing the wreckage, Cabot immediately thought it probably came from a weather balloon, but Marcel had other ideas. Marcel had a preconceived notion that it must have been part of the flying disc that he had heard about. On July 8th, Tuesday, The Public Information Office at the base made the announcement that they had recovered a flying disc approved by Colonel Blanchard. This created newspaper headlines. It was a sensational story, circulated all around the world. However, at the intervention of Brigadier General Roger Ramey, who had also inspected the wreckage, a press conference was soon held that included Marcel. The Army rather simplistically and inadequately announced that the fuss was over nothing more than a weather balloon, pieces of which were duly paraded for public display. It should be noted that it wasn't just a weather balloon. It was a slightly modified, newer type of high-altitude reconnaissance balloon made to detect reverberations from Russian nuclear tests. Now, prior to the press conference, a weather officer by the name of Irving Newton remembered seeing pieces of what he recognized as a weather balloon laid out in Ramey's office. In 1994, Newton told investigators, "I remember Major Marcel chased me all around that room. He kept saying things like, 'Look how tough that metal is. Look at the strange markings on it.' While I was examining the debris, Marcel was picking up pieces of the radar target sticks and trying to convince me that some notations on the sticks were alien writings. But I was adamant that it was a weather balloon with a Raywin radar target. I think he was embarrassed as crazy, and he would like to do anything to make that turn into a flying saucer." On July 9th, Wednesday, Ramey's statement appears on Roswell Daily Record newspaper. General Ramey empties Roswell saucer. On July 9th, Mac Brazel's statement of regret appeared on Roswell Daily Record newspaper. It said, "Harassed rancher who located the so-called saucer, sorry he told about it." And you can read about Mac Brazel's statement of regret on the website, but the bottom line is this. Marcel, by the way, didn't agree with this conclusion, probably because this was unlike any weather balloon he had ever seen. It was not just a weather balloon. It was a top-secret program called Project Mogul, which was finally and officially revealed in 1994. Around that time, there were other high-altitude reconnaissance balloon projects from the era that included Project Skyhook, Project Grandson, Project Genetrix, Project Moby Dick, pictured above. And that was the end of the whole story. Yes, that was the end of the whole story, and Roswell became a non-issue until more than 30 years later, when a partially disinformative book entitled The Roswell Incident was published. And gullible folks, as well as the so-called UFO industry and UFO museum in Roswell, played a role in propagating the story all over again. Yes, tall tales about Roswell, that is, aliens, pilots, bodies, nurses, hangar in Roswell, etc., ad nauseum, started to circulate around 30 years or more after this incident, including unreliable second-hand, third-hand, and fourth-hand witnesses who jumped into the bandwagon of fame after this popular but misinformative book came out in 1980, written by a known self-claimed disinformation agent by the name of William L. Moore. More than 30 years after the incident, a few die-hard believers in the alien saucer myth started questioning again the explanation that it was a weather balloon. And they were right. It was not just a weather balloon. It was a top-secret program called Project Mogul, which was finally and officially revealed in 1994. Yes, that's right. The partially disinformative book entitled The Roswell Incident came out in 1980, co-authored by Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore, who later on identified himself as a disinformation agent. It became a bestseller. By the way, it was also in 1980, the very same year of the publication of the Roswell incident, that William L. Moore visited Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to collaborate on another project with another self-claimed UFO disinformation agent, Richard C. Doty, who was working as an AFOSI officer at the base. Now, in order to write this book, the authors, William L. Moore and Charles Berlitz, claimed they interviewed some of the 50 or so-called witnesses to this incident. They also delegated a few researchers to search for any other so-called witnesses in the Roswell area. Also independent from them were a few other researchers, such as Stanton Friedman, who on their own attempted to look for witnesses. Now, the big problem was that they interviewed folks more than 30 years after the incident took place. And many of the so-called witnesses were nothing more than second-hand and third-hand witnesses. Many of them were willing to be interviewed for the chance to be in the spotlight, so to speak. There were also some latecomer witnesses to this circus, such as Glenn Dennis, who in 1989 began to claim that he was working as a mortician the day the saucer wreckage arrived, and that he knew a nurse who supposedly assisted at the alien autopsies, but her name has never appeared on any records. Glenn Dennis later became the founder of the UFO Museum at Roswell. Now, here's the bottom line. It was the town of Roswell that eventually benefited from the 1947 alien saucer crash myth, and those who continue to propagate the alien saucer crash story. That is the so-called UFO industry. Thank you so much for seeing this presentation.